Greetings, fellow horror fans. Want to look at the Candyman series now continues on with Candyman Farewell to the Flesh. 3 years after the Candyman murders in Chicago, Professor Philip Purcell writes a book about the Candyman legend and hosts a lecture event in New Orleans discussing his life. He recounts Candyman's name to be Daniel Robitaille, and that he was born to enslaved Africans after the American Civil War. When Purcell's lightheartedly challenged by a member of the audience, he jokingly summons the Candyman in the mirror-like reflection of his book. After the event, Purcell was Ethan Tarrant, one of the attendees. Ethan's father, Coleman, was murdered while investigating the deaths of 3 men in a manner similar to the Candyman legend. Ethan angrily says that Purcell caused his father's death by telling him the Candyman doesn't exist and that the Candyman then killed him. At first polite, Purcell becomes annoyed at Ethan's behavior. He goes to a nearby bar, but is pursued and attacked by Ethan, who is thrown out by the barman. Purcell goes to the restroom to clean blood from his face and is killed by the Candyman. The case is handled by Detective Ray Levesque and his partner Pam Carver. They consider Ethan a suspect given his confrontation with Purcell. Ethan's mother Octavia and his young sister Annie, an art teacher, come to the station to defend him. Ethan is pressured by Levesque, who believes him to be guilty. In the meantime, Matthew Ellis, one of Annie's students, claims to have seen the Candyman. Annie tries to discredit the legend by invoking his name. Her husband, Paul, becomes one of his victims. The Candyman stalks Annie so he may kill her, and reveals that she is pregnant with Paul's daughter. At home one morning, Annie gets a visit from a couple of her students about Matthew disappearing. Annie meets with his father, Reverend Ellis, and learns Matthew had dreams of the Candyman and sketched out the events of his death. After talking with Ethan to uncover more of their father's murder, Annie visits Honor Thibodeau, Coleman's friend, unaware Levesque is following her as a suspect. Honor tells Annie about Daniel Robitaille and his affair with a white woman named Caroline that led to his death, and earning him the name Candyman. Caroline's father taunted the dying Daniel with Caroline's mirror, capturing a part of his soul. Caroline had the man near Daniel's birthplace and granted him the ability to kill when called upon. Annie's father believes that if the mirror is destroyed, it will end the curse. The Candyman appears and kills Honor. Levesque finds Honor's body and believes Annie killed him. Annie returns to Matthew's house and his father shows her documents of Daniel's birth and realizes he was born in the same house she was. The Reverend leads Annie to a cemetery where she sees his grave with Caroline buried next to him and indicating that they had a daughter named Isabel. Going through old family pictures, Anne discovers she is a descendant of theirs, and the Caroline bought Daniel's house, where Annie and Ethan later grew up as children, and where Ethan discovered Coleman died and resulted in him summoning the Candyman to defeat him. At the police station, Levesque tries to get Ethan to admit that Annie did the killings and he is covering for her. Levesque is killed by the Candyman after summoning him to mock Ethan, who was shot dead when he tries to escape. Annie calls Octavia about the Candyman, and Octavia admits that Coleman tried to link their family to the Candyman and continues to deny him to protect her family's name. Insisted by his disbelief, the Candyman kills her, and Annie flees. With the police on her trail, Annie runs into Carver, who tells her she has seen how Levesque died on camera footage. She lets Annie escape. Annie goes to Daniel's birthplace and finds Matthew in an old shed. She follows the stairs into the flooded basement, where she finds Caroline's mirror and the Candyman. Before I can sacrifice her, Annie destroys the mirror, annihilating him. The slave quarters crash into the river, but Matthew saves Annie. Annie returns Matthew home, where they are both blessed by Reverend Ellis at his church. 5 years later, Annie teaches her young daughter Caroline about her family history, naming her after Daniel's lover. After Annie kisses her goodnight and leaves the room, Caroline starts to chant the Candyman's name. Annie stops her and tells her to go to bed. So let's look at the production of this movie, beginning with the development. According to Virginia Madsen, Bernard Rose, the director of the 1992 Candyman film, originally had another concept in mind for the sequel. Quote, "They originally wanted us to do Candyman 2, but they didn't like Bernard's idea for the sequel. They made the Candyman into a slave, which was terrible because the Candyman was educated and raised as a free man. Bernie wanted him to make him like an African American Dracula, which I think was so appealing to the African American community because they finally had their own Dracula. The Candyman was a poet and smart. He wasn't really a monster. He was sort of the classical figure. End quote. The sequel that Bernie wanted to make was a prequel where you see the Candyman and Helen fall in love. It was turned out because they didn't want to do an interracial love story. In 2020, Blighty Discussing reported that there was another unmade follow-up titled Candyman 2: The Midnight Meat Train. Rose was meant to be the director once again, and was supposed to be about a mythical figure haunting the early 1990s London. The sequel would have been somewhat based on Clive Barker's Books of Blood short story taking place in Subway. Ross further elaborated, quote, "The idea was that the Jack the Ripper murder started to happen, whereas the first Candyman was about race. The idea was to make the second Candyman about gender. It was meant to be the idea of this faceless, brutal killer who only attacked women in a horrific sexual manner, and whose prime objective was to stop whores. This weird moralistic take to it, the Ripper is like a Candyman." End quote. The Midnight Train inspired follow-up went unproduced because the studio found a screenplay too risky. The only scene from Rose's draft of the movie left in the actual sequel, Candyman Feral to the Flesh, is one featuring Professor Philip Purcell, the surviving character from the first film. Actress Tuesday Knight was reported to have declined to role in Feral to the Flesh, and later claimed it was a horror film that she regrets turning down. And now finally onto the filming. Filming took place on location in New Orleans, Louisiana, and Los Angeles, California. Principal photography began August 16, 1994, and filming wrapped on October 19th of the same year. So far, I think this entry of the series is pretty okay, and yeah, it's kind of interesting we do get a little bit more of the lore as well as his name. So yeah. So overall, I give Candyman Farewell to the Flesh. I give it 3 jack-o'-lanterns out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in tomorrow as we take the third film in the series, Candyman 3: Day of the Dead. So until then, remember, whatever you do, don't fall asleep.